The holidays are over and it's time to get back to business. This morning we're going to hear from the South Carolina Tea Party Coalition founder and executive director, Joe Dugan, who's talking about their big convention that's coming up. We'll also hear from the Horry County Democratic Party and their plans for 2015. Carolina This Week starts right now.
This is Carolina This Week. Carolina This Week with Tim McGinnis.
Good morning. Thanks for joining us for this first show of 2015. This morning we're going to hear from the Horry County Democratic Chairman, Joan Furlong. But first up this morning is Joe Dugan, who is the head of the South Carolina Tea Party Coalition. He's the founder and you're the executive director of the big convention that you're going to be hosting coming up in about 3 weeks now, January 18th.
Yeah. January 17th.
January the 17th to 19th.
So 2 weeks from tomorrow.
And you have a lot of big names coming through for this, not just people who are running for office and hold office, but just well-known figures in politics. Tell me, this is the fourth year. I can't believe it because I think you were on here to talk about the first one, and it was kind of who knows how it's going to turn. Who knows how it's going to turn out? This thing has really grown.
It certainly has, and I think we've really built a brand with what our format is and what we do. And I'd like to thank you and your channel for having us on each year and giving us the opportunity to tell the local viewers about what's coming up in case they want to attend it.
Well, and this year you can. In previous years it was a little bit tougher to get access to get into it. You hold this at the Springmaid Pier, or the Springmaid Resort, the Springmaid Pier, and if you can go to to your website, and we're going to have a link to that on carolinalive.com. So head over to carolinalive.com and you can get there. And the list of speakers this year is really just Ted Cruz, Senator Ted Cruz from Texas. You have Dr. Ben Carson, who's been who it looks like is about to announce he's going to run for president any day now. Former Senator Rick Santorum, many other names.
Oh, absolutely. The speakers that we have each year to talk about the issues are really the top experts in the country on the issues that we ask them to speak on. And the rule is that we ask them to be totally candid and bold, and they have to leave political correctness outside the convention center, because we want to hear the honest truth, and that's what our challenge is, and that's what's made us so successful and allowed us to grow the way we have. There are some things that are very personally satisfying for us in that by inviting these people not just down to speak for 20 minutes or a half hour, we invite them down for the weekend. And the relationships that are built between these speakers and the feedback that we get is just phenomenal. So it's they're sharing knowledge with each other, and our audience is sharing with all that, and they get to spend some time with the speakers, not just see them on the stage. So it's really quite an experience.
And you have a platform right here, Joe. Where is the Tea Party right now in 2015? We saw 2014 was a successful year for the midterm elections. We've seen some Tea Party candidates elected, others not so successful around the country. What separates the Tea Party from the Republican Party at this point? What unites it?
You know, I think, Tim, that perhaps we use the term Tea Party too much, because the Tea Party is really middle-class America. What they want is an honest government that will tell them the truth, watch how they spend their tax dollars, and serve the people, and then get back to their lives as it was during the founding of our country. We don't want anything special, privileges or anything like that. We want what we've always had: the Constitution, the Bill of Rights, and that provides opportunity for everybody. Our nation became the greatest nation on earth because of immigrants. But there was a difference. Those immigrants came to this country legally and became part of a melting pot. And what that means, becoming part of a melting pot, is that there was a deep burning desire in each of them to become an American. They didn't want to come to this country and not participate fully in America. And that's so different from the multiculturalism that we have today, where it seems like the government is trying to divide people into different sectors and groups, and we need a united America again. That's how we have succeeded in the past. That's how we're going to succeed again.
Well, I'm going to ask this question to Joan Furlong, who's going to be on from the Horry County Democratic Party. I want to ask you, too. There seems to be such polarization right now. And, you know, you look at Congress, and Congress doesn't get a whole lot accomplished. Mm-hmm. Do you think maybe are the parties going to start working together again, or are opposing factions going to come together, you think, to work again? Is that something that I think maybe there might be an idea that the Tea Party is against coming together to work with other people, that they're obstinate. Is that the case?
The Tea Party is against the destruction of the Constitution, the shredding of the Bill of Rights, the seizing of private property. Yes, the Tea Party is against those things, and so should every American be against those things. The people that would say that we need to compromise, well, compromise is a word that implies that there are two sides willing to budge a little bit. That's not what we have seen. I mean, we have seen Harry Reid in the Senate not allowing a vote on a bill for 4 years or more. So how do you compromise with an immovable object? I mean, if there's compromise, true compromise, then let's not look at who's going to get a bigger piece of the pie. Let's compromise on the things that are going to be best for America. Because what's best for America is best for everyone that's living in America.
I want to take a break. When we come back, I want to talk a little bit more about the convention. I want to talk about the people who are coming. We know the big names. I want you to tell me who some of the names that I may not have heard of before that are going to be there that you think we need to hear. Let's take a quick break. We'll come back with Joe Dugan, the Executive Director of the South Carolina Tea Party Coalition. We'll be right back. Welcome back to Carolina This Week. Joe Dugan, the Executive Director of the South Carolina Tea Party Coalition, is with me right now. Coming up a little bit later, we'll hear from Joan Furlong, the Horry County Democratic Party Chairman. You have a big convention coming up week of January 17th through 19th. Mm-hmm. Lots of speakers. We mentioned them before. You just announced Senator Ted Cruz from Texas.
Yes.
Rick Santorum. Just last night. Rick Santorum. Dr. Ben Carson, who's got a lot of buzz right now. Looks like all signs point toward his presidential candidacy. We know those names, and we know some of the names of the other congressmen who are going to be there. Who's going to be there that we may not have heard of that you think people need to hear?
Well, we have 4 panels this year. Over the past couple of years, we've gravitated a little bit more towards panels to give us a little bit more time and a couple of people discussing some of the critical issues that America faces. So we're going to have a panel on securing the border and amnesty, and that will be on Saturday. And we'll also have a panel on looking for a free market replacement for Obamacare, something that would free up allowing insurance companies to cross state lines and maybe having certain pricing on the internet, and there'll be solutions offered there, and they're worth listening to. And I hope some of these people that come as potential presidential candidates will listen to some of those messages too. We also have, this is a critical issue that has been on our radar for a long time, and that's EMP, electromagnetic pulse. We have had Ambassador Henry Cooper, who's an expert in that. He was a big part of Ronald Reagan's missile defense system, and he's going to be bringing someone from a retired Major General from the National Guard in South Carolina to talk about what the states can do or areas of the country can do as opposed to the federal government, because the federal government just seems to be...
Electromagnetic pulse, what?
That is where you have a nuclear explosion a mile over the earth, or a solar burst that would totally wipe out the electrical grid in the country and set us back into the 17th century. And millions and millions and millions of people would be killed. I mean, just imagine that you don't have electricity and the freezers don't work in your supermarkets, and you can't pump gasoline. Cars won't work because they're all electronic now. There's a fascinating book, 1 Second After, that was a fiction about such an incident. But so that's an important issue for us. And then we have a wonderful, wonderful national security panel. That's always a highlight of our convention. And we've invited Lieutenant Colonel Bill Cowan, retired from the United States Marine Corps, who's a frequent Fox contributor.
He's been on this show before.
Yes. And so he will be on the panel with Gordon G. Chang, who is a noted expert on national security and in China in particular. And he's written a book about the fall of China. When big things happen in one country, you know, this whole global environment that we're in, it's a domino effect. You can't live in isolation anymore. So something happens in one country, like Russia is losing half their income now with the price of gasoline dropping. Well, that's going to have ramifications for the Russian people and may make them more aggressive, or who knows.
We've got a lot to talk about in 3 days.
Oh, yeah.
That's January 17th through 19th.
Absolutely.
It's going to be at the Spring Maid Resort in Myrtle Beach. You can go to carolinalive.com. You'll find the link to the website if you'd like to sign up to attend, find out who some of the other speakers are. Joe Dugan, for the 4th year in a row talking about this, thanks for coming on and doing it.
Well, thank you, Tim.
All right.
And we hope to see you down there.
I'll try to make it. We're going to take a quick break. When we come back, Horry County Democratic Party Chairman Joan Furlong comes in to talk with us. We'll be right back. Welcome back to Carolina This Week. The other side of the coin now, we have Joan Furlong, the head of the Horry County Democratic Party. Thanks for joining us this morning.
I'm glad to be back, Tim. Great to see you.
First off, what do you think is in store for Democrats in South Carolina, Horry County in particular, in 2015?
2015 will be a promising year. You know, we're regrouping after 2014. This will be a year for the state and local parties to look at our structure, to look at messaging, and to look at our voter outreach. So we'll be concentrating on those things. Now, Horry County Democrats will be meeting in the next couple of weeks to lay out our action agenda for 2015. So those meetings are yet to happen. But at the state level, we're already in the midst of planning the 4th annual Issues Conference, and Horry County is going to be the host this year. So we're going to have hundreds of Democrats coming into Myrtle Beach in late February, February 27th, 28th. And I'll be letting you know when we get our roster of speakers lined up.
You mentioned 2014 was a tough year for Democrats, not just here in South Carolina, but around the country. And South Carolina is going to be a tough state to get the Democratic message over. How do you convince people, and there probably aren't too many of them, who are on the fence between the red line and the blue line? How do you get them to come over to your side? What words can you give them that might change their minds?
We need to improve our outreach and message to working adults, young adults. We need to show that democratic values are their values, that what the Democratic Party represents in terms of helping people build safe, productive lives, providing working families with jobs that pay a decent, livable wage, that there's access to health care, that there's access to low-cost transportation, public transportation. These are all of the things that people need to have a strong economic life, and we need that to grow our economy. It starts with the individual and his or her family.
You know, I've heard it from guests on this show, people out in the community, that one of their biggest problems, particularly in Horry County with Democratic way of doing things, comes down to regulations. And a lot of small businesses here say there's just too much government and business to begin with. We don't need more regulations imposed on us. How do you think people may have a misconception of the way the Democratic Party handles regulation, or do you think that it's just a fundamental difference?
I think there's some misconception. After all, many regulations that are in place today at the federal level were instituted during Republican administrations as well as Democratic. So there has always been an interest, I believe, in making sure that the workplace is safe, that we protect our environment, that workers are treated fairly and equitably. Those are essential components. And is there over-regulation? I'm sure that there are always places where we can look at easing up paperwork requirements and other aspects of regulation. But regulation in and of itself is not a bad thing. In fact, it works to the benefit of people in our society in many ways.
Well, you look at the Affordable Care Act and you hear, I've heard employers say, well, if I'm going to just drop this employee if I have them part-time 30 hours a week and I don't have to pay health care for them right now, well, I can't afford that extra cost. I'm just going to have to let the employee go. That's one of the bigger arguments, I think, on regulation that I've heard, is particularly in connection to the Affordable Care Act and the burden that's being put on the employer.
I can't speak to any specific instances in Horry County where that has been the case. I think some of these stories are a bit apocryphal, that these were worries and concerns for businesses that didn't necessarily take place. In fact, millions of people and thousands here in South Carolina now have access to health insurance that they didn't have a year and a half ago. Is it perfect? No. Are we working to improve it, to streamline it, to attract more companies to participate? You know, it's a market-based program, and I think that's something for our opponents to like.
Let's talk about the national scene right now and who might be. We've heard a lot of names bandied about for the Republican nomination. Not quite as many for the Democratic nomination, but you do have the three big ones. I think are Hillary Clinton, Vice President Joe Biden, and Senator Elizabeth Warren. Anybody else out there? What do you think of the field so far, or the presumed field so far?
Presumed field. That's right. That's right. We aren't going to jump to any conclusions yet.
Right.
Other names that I've read and talked about are Martin O'Malley, former governor. He's just stepped out of the governorship of Maryland. Bernie Sanders has a following, the independent senator from Vermont. And there is an up-and-coming crop of young senators and representatives who, you know, may prove to be very interesting in 2015. We'll be watching.
I can't remember his name. I think it's the mayor of San Antonio, Texas. He's making a big name for himself. And
his twin.
And his twin. He has a twin brother. That's right.
Joaquin Castro and his brother. I'm blanking on it. Yeah.
That's the name.
Mm-hmm.
Locally, around the state, again, tough year 2014. Bakari Sellers. A lot of people were hoping that he would win lieutenant governor. He lost to former Attorney General Henry McMaster. Who's the future of the party in South Carolina? We've seen Gloria Tinubu here run several times, run twice now for the 7th district seat. We've seen Bakari Sellers go from representative to that candidate for lieutenant governor. Is there anybody else you think that's going to step up and try to take the Democratic Party back in South Carolina?
Well, certainly Bakari and many of our other candidates on the ballot this year are not gone. Bakari is a strong, young Democrat who has a great deal of promise and potential for an elected office in South Carolina. I think that we'll see, as this next legislative session gets going, we'll see what our Democrats are doing in Columbia and be able to step back and take a look.
How about around here? You know, one of the things I noticed when I was, in covering the elections in 2014, just in Horry County, so many seats were just unopposed. There was no Democratic opposition.
That's right.
Just a handful, not even a handful, really, just maybe 2 or 3 off the top of my head that that there was any. Is the party going to try to recruit some people to run? Is there going to be a resurgence, do you believe? I know you talked about stepping into the new year ready to fight. Do you think that's going to happen?
That's absolutely one of the challenges that we have for Horry County and many other counties across the state. We need to identify good, strong, qualified candidates for positions up and down the ballot. It's true we had very few candidates. We had 4 Democrats on the county ballot this time. We need to multiply that many-fold. It's an uphill battle, obviously, getting someone to run on the blue ticket in a red county. But what's important is to have people campaigning and reaching out to the voters and talking to them about democratic values and our policies and what difference we believe Democrats can make in people's lives. Is it going to turn around overnight? No, but we have our work cut out for us in 2015.
Yeah, you know, and I was reminded recently with the passing of former South Carolina governor, who was the first governor since Reconstruction to be a Republican elected. And so Democrats at one point controlled the state until the 1980s, till the 1970s, 1980s, and that's when everything really changed.
But the party has changed. You know, the Democrats controlling South Carolina for those many years were the post-Reconstruction Democrats. And today's Democratic Party represents the values that we all share of equal opportunity, civil rights, voter protection. The Democratic Party today is not the Democratic Party of South Carolina in the 60s, 70s, and 80s. So we have changed places.
Different ballgame.
In many ways, yes.
And last question, I asked this of Joe Dugan too, who was with the South Carolina Tea Party Coalition. There's such a polar divide in politics right now in the country. Do you think, is it possible that maybe we're going to see the two parties work together?
I certainly would think so. I mean, there are issues where I believe that we have shared interest. Again, protecting and strengthening families, protecting the environment, encouraging small businesses. These are things that Democrats and Republicans together can work hand in hand, and I believe that we could. And at the county level, there are certainly opportunities in economic development and building our tourist market, looking at alternative energy development. There's so much that we can do, I think, as a united people.
Joan Furlong, head of the Horry County Democratic Party, thanks for coming in and talking with me this morning.
Thank you, Tim.
All right. Stay with us. We'll be right back with more Carolina This Week. That's all for Carolina This Week. Hope to see you back here next Sunday morning at 11 a.m.